that. I've been saving up the puns for Dave, our stage manager. When it comes to an organ transplant, I deliver.
Davey's got you beat, man. He's got you beat.
I guess, the joke sounded better like 2 months ago. I've been sitting on it too long.
Yeah, you waited too long.
I'm so happy to be here.
I liked it.
It's true.
Back
Those cards you shared, I mean, I just opened one random one. I opened your mail. It's a federal offense. Dear Ed, it takes a special person like yourself to give this special gift to Colleen. The news sounds positive.
This is what I found in my office.
We love you, and prayers are with you. This is from fans Maria and Frank Kelly. You don't know them, right?
There's prayer cards in here. These are from strangers, but they're really not strangers. They're friends of the show. They're friends of Fox, and they're now friends of Colleen and I. And we thank you. I mean, honestly, this is also just what I found here in New York. People send stuff to my apartment in Maryland.
Ed, I had people stopping me on the Fox Square and giving me stuff to put under your door to give to you.
That's true.
Almost every week.
We had a viewer who gave you a check to give to my sister. And I got it on my desk. So thank you for all your wonderful outpouring of support. We appreciate it.
Welcome back.
Good
We're
to be
excited
back.
to have you.
Thank you so much.
If you give me a check for Ed, it might not make it.
That's why they gave it to me.
Well, that's because for other people, the economy is pretty good right now.
True.
So they're going to make sure and they pass along that check because the August jobs report came out. It showed that despite a lot of the pessimism that some may be pushing, the labor force participation rate is actually up. More people are working. Hourly earnings are up. And get this, African-American unemployment, that rate fell to the lowest in history.
So more people are working. They're getting paid more. And black unemployment, people who have been left behind too often in too many places are getting better opportunities than ever. It's such great news and overwhelming good news across the board. Yet you hear the continuing pessimism all the time. Not enough. Recession is coming. The drumbeat never stops. Well, Larry Kudlow, who's the National Economic Council Director, he weighed in on how to view these jobs numbers. Here's what he said.
They're coming out of the woodwork, and they're coming back to work. So household survey up 590,000. It's an unbelievable blowout number. Civilian labor force picks up by 571,000. All I want to say is America is working. In the last 3 months, average hourly earnings have picked up to 4%, 4.2% at an annual rate. And by the way, that's what the productivity numbers are showing. So look, this actually was a blowout number, and I want people to appreciate the magnitudes here.
You wouldn't expect that if you listen to some of the media who've been saying for weeks now that we're headed towards a recession.
Yep, check out some of these headlines. Newsweek, jobs report falls short of expectations, stokes recession fears. The Hill, an underwhelming August jobs report adds to fears of an economic slowdown, raising the stakes for President Trump's re-election. It's amazing. This is why Democrats are doing 7-hour debates on climate change. Because, no, really, though, because it's very difficult to talk about the economy and come out with solutions that people are going to find palatable. When you look at numbers like this, what are you going to say? Oh, hey, all the stuff that President Trump's done that's achieved all this success, I'm going to do the opposite of that and vote for me. Yeah, no, that's not a good campaign slogan. So it's all pivoting away from the economy for them. They have a really hard time talking about the economy right now.
They're rooting for the economy to fail. They're cheering for it to fail. They're wishing it into existence. I was on with Stuart Varney yesterday, and he laid out a big, in his My Take at the top of his show, but if you listen to any other network, including other business networks, you never get this good news. They don't talk about it, yet the stock market, which almost reached an all-time high yet again, is a reflection of healthy corporate environments and balance sheets that are delivering, and people are working more, but no one wants to talk about it.
If there were someone who might have a reason to say things are not good, it would be Jerome Powell, because he's the Fed chairman who's been under attack from the president, who has not liked the policies he's been pushing. He wants to see interest rates cut a little faster, and yet Jerome Powell came out yesterday and actually agreed with the president, downplaying fears of recession. Watch.
So we're not forecasting or expecting a recession. The most likely outlook for the United States economy is still moderate growth, a strong labor market, and inflation continuing to move back up. Payroll jobs are coming in at well above the level that new people are entering the labor market, and that means that the labor market is still tightening at the margin. By so many measures, the labor market continues to strengthen. So the consumer's in good shape, and really there's our main expectation is not at all that there'll be a recession.
Now, to be clear, he's still saying, Jerome Powell, as Fed chair, that he's concerned about the trade war and that there's uncertainty there. He's not completely on board, obviously, with what the president has said on the economy, but you hear there him laying out all kinds of optimistic numbers and saying, in fact, that he feels good about the economy and downplaying the idea of recession.
This is why politics drives me nuts, though, because everyone should be celebrating this. This should be across the board, left, right, and center. Everyone should be happy that people in the country are doing well, that they have keeping more of their hard-earned cash, that there are more jobs, that there's more productivity, and yet, because of the way politics has become, it's so polarizing, so many people are waiting on the sidelines. We've heard people like Bill Maher say it outright, that it's, oh, let's hope for a recession because it'll hurt President Trump. That is so horrifying to me, especially when you're talking about people around the country who are either suffering or doing well. You want them to do well if you care about this country.
Ed, you mentioned the trade war in that same idea. If you want the home team to win, then close ranks and support the fact that we're staring down an economic behemoth who seeks our destruction. And you talk to these farmers, which I have in the Midwest, they're feeling the hurt a little bit, but they say, hey, we see the long-term picture. We're willing to take a hit so that America's on a better level playing field. So it all depends on how you paint it. And President Trump has exposed the fake news media for who they are, which are left-wingers rooting against him.
And here on the other side, you still have more than a dozen Democratic candidates who want the president's job. Joe Biden still, at least in the polls, is the front runner. Some questions about whether he can keep that up after a whole series of blunders. Now mixing up President Reagan and President Nixon. Remember, he had mixed up Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher as British prime ministers generations apart. Here's a little look at some of his recent blunders. Watch.
I'm the only guy that's beaten the NRA. I got assault weapons banned for 10 years. It had to be reauthorized. The last president said, no, I'm not going to reauthorize it. I doubt whether any of you ever thought you'd see what happened in Charlottesville in 2017. But, kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree. But I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel. When Ronald Reagan, when Richard Nixon started the war on cancer, he meant well.
Here's the thing, though, like, these gaffes don't affect his likability to me. I feel like this is part of his charm that he makes, oh, there goes Goofy Joe saying something that's not right. For some reason, he's not held accountable for these misstatements, for sometimes he says something totally untrue. It seems like he's remembering a completely different past that actually happened, and yet somehow he's not being held accountable. He's still a clear frontrunner here.
He is, because of his name ID and his association with Barack Obama. But he's clearly lost a step. And if you want, if it's the fourth quarter and you're in the Super Bowl and you're about to take on President Trump in what many people deem to be one of the most consequential elections in our country's history, you want your best player at the top of their game. Yeah. And he's clearly not at the top of his game. Who knows when it was, but it's not today.
Yeah, it was a 24-year-old woman that he was calling a kid. Maybe he was just being nice because he wanted to say you look very young. But she wasn't quite a kid. She was 24.
We'll see how it plays out in the debate stage next week.
That's true. We're going to turn to some headlines for you now. Hurricane Dorian now heading out to sea after leaving catastrophic flooding in North Carolina. The storm making landfall on the state's Outer Banks as a Category 1 hurricane, wind gusting over 100 miles per hour and dumping nearly 14 inches of rain in some areas. The Coast Guard delivering food and supplies to the hundreds stranded. At least 43 deaths are now being blamed on Dorian in the Bahamas, where new before and after pictures show the devastation, new before and after pictures show the devastation on the island nation. And a woman falls 500 feet to her death while hiking at Yosemite National Park. Danielle Burnett was climbing what's known as the Half Dome when officials say she fell from the steepest part. A family member writing on Facebook, quote, "Our beautiful Danielle left us doing something she loved so much." Thousands of hikers make the 14-mile round trip each year. And President Trump shifting his focus toward another swing state. The president set to hold a campaign rally in New Mexico later this month. The state has long been considered Democratic-leaning, voting for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and President Obama before that. But the president's campaign hopes the recent economic boom could swing voters. And you're looking at the world's oldest mom. Doctors say this Indian woman gave birth to twin baby girls at the age of 74.
What?
After trying with her husband for decades, she became pregnant through in vitro fertilization. The girls were delivered by C-section and are said to be happy and healthy. The previous record holder for oldest mom was 70 years old. Wow.
Whoa, that's impressive. That's some biblical stuff right there.
That really is.
I mean, that is... Wow.
That's tough, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that the babies are happy and healthy, though.
Yeah, God bless them.
Yeah.
So have you guys had breakfast?
Yeah.
You already had breakfast?
Yeah.
I have not had breakfast yet.
Wow.
I'm hoping that there's barbecue on the show. That will be breakfast.
That's not breakfast.
But more than half, we're now learning that more than half of Americans want second breakfast to officially be a thing.
Agree.
Meaning you have one breakfast and then you have a second breakfast, and that's called second breakfast?
Absolutely.
Yes.
62%
I think there's a big spread, especially if you get up early like I do. If you're up at 5 or 6 or something like that, by the time noon comes, it's so you kind of want to have maybe like a hard-boiled egg at 6, and then at 9 or 10 you want some yogurt or you want a pancake.
Isn't that called a snack?
No.
Like, why does it have to be called another breakfast?
Because it's still breakfast food. Like you got to have in the morning. You could have your eggs, your hash browns, or your toast, or whatever it is, and then you get to space out the pancakes, and that becomes dessert. It's like then you got your blueberry pancakes.
Okay, you're making a pretty good case.
Right? And breakfast food is honestly, people at home, you know what I'm talking about. Breakfast food is just delicious when it's done right.
And look at some of them. Your top ones. Donuts would be 10, home fries 9, oatmeal 8, fresh fruit 7, cereal 6. Now we're getting to the really good stuff. Bacon at 5, pancakes at 4, toast at 3, sausage number 2, and yes, eggs at number 1, scrambling the entire list.
You don't really need lunch, because what is lunch? A sandwich and a salad? I mean, that just can't be
lunch is
good pancakes.
highly overrated, I agree.
Right.
Unless you go with a juicy cheeseburger, and then it's kind of dinner for lunch. But I'll say this, what I have for breakfast nearly every morning when I have the choice is just eggs and sausage.
Pizza better at lunch or dinner?
Pizza better at lunch or dinner?
Dinner for me. Dinner's just a better meal for me. I feel happier.
Dinner, but I feel like meat for dinner is so important that when you go with pizza, you're missing a little bit.
So what do you think? Pizza, lunch, or dinner? Second breakfast or no? Or is it just really a snack? Friends at 5.
Sausage links or sausage patties? That's usually my biggest decision.
Oh, I like a link.
And I like the patty.
Oh,
I'm going to add one more element. Breakfast pizza. That's a whole nother.
Pineapple.
Hit it. We've solved every problem on earth. All right, well,
Well, this is a big story. A potential tragedy in the skies thwarted. An American Airlines mechanic appearing in federal court yesterday, seen there, accused of tampering with a plane that was packed with passengers at the very busy Miami International Airport. Now, pilots thankfully stopped the flight when they saw an error message for a system that tracks critical flight information. This, as we learn, he was reportedly fired from Alaska Airlines a decade ago over a series of performance issues. How could something like this happen? Let's ask aviation expert, pilot, and former FAA safety team rep, Kyle Bailey. Good to see you, Kyle.
Good morning, Ed.
What do people waking up this morning need to know about this case?
You know, typically this can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're an airline pilot, a mechanic, or just a regular person with a regular job. You know, people snap, people are stressed out, people have financial problems. And the bottom line is you really can't weed this out.
Because on that point, my understanding is he was sort of tinkering with things because he wanted more overtime pay when you talk about financial issues. So the idea that you're sitting on a plane, you're about to leave Miami with your family, and someone who works for the airlines is allegedly fiddling with things to make it bad so he can then fix it and work longer, but God forbid it goes wrong, you could die.
It's scary, but the good news is there are so many redundant systems on the airplane. Systems are checking one another. There's quite often, you know, with the pitot tube, which was involved in this instance, that's the device where air goes through there and pretty much is giving you an airspeed calibration, and there's an angle of attack indicator. There's typically 2 of these on the airplane. If one of them fails or isn't working, it will give you a disagreement light, or the pilot will see that one is inoperative.
And thankfully, to your point, in this case, the pilots, that system worked. I want to be fair to American Airlines. This is what they told Gizmodo. At the time of the incident, the aircraft was taken out of service, maintenance was performed, and after an inspection to ensure it was safe, the aircraft was returned to service. American immediately notified federal law enforcement, who took over the investigation with our full cooperation. That's all well and good. But to your first point about anybody on a job could snap, does there need to be a better system in place to weed folks like this out? It's one thing, you go to the deli and get a sandwich and a person snaps and maybe the sandwich gets messed up. Someone working for an airlines, this person, as we said, the suspect, he was fired allegedly from Alaska Airlines years ago because of performance problems. Now he's at American and there's more trouble.
You know, just reviewing what actually happened with him working with Alaska Airlines, it appears he had 2 jobs simultaneously, American and Alaska Airlines. So my gut feeling is that he was probably working 2 shifts, perhaps a day and a night, and then you're very, very tired.
But isn't that kind of scary that guys like that are tired?
It is scary. And to give you an example, for pilots, you can't work, say, for 2 airlines.
Right.
You're limited to a number of hours per day.
Of course.
But perhaps that needs to be looked at for airline mechanics.
Here is, in fact, what the Transport Workers Union said. They represent some of the mechanics. The Transport Workers Union is shocked by the reported allegations of airplane sabotage by an employee. If these allegations of sabotage are true, they are outrageous and indefensible, and we fully condemn such actions. We also reached out to Alaska Airlines, who we mentioned, for a statement. We have not yet heard back, but we will certainly, if we get that, add to it. Last point, what needs to be done moving forward to make sure the public's safe?
You know, I think, there should be zero tolerance with this. I mean, this individual is looking at possibly a $10,000 fine and up to 20 years in prison for each occurrence under federal law. I think, obviously, perhaps maybe should there be medical certification for mechanics like air traffic controllers and pilots. But in my gut feeling, I mean, this was probably a bad apple, and it's very hard to pretty much weed them out from a large group. But
hopefully a prison sentence like that, to your point, could weed them out and will be a deterrent. We certainly hope so. Kyle Bailey, we appreciate your insight this morning.
Nice to be with you.
Next, some alarming new numbers about vaping. 5 deaths are now being blamed on...
Now issuing a strong warning about vaping. The agency reported the number of possible cases of severe respiratory illnesses linked to vaping has surged to 450 in 33 states. And there have been at least 5 deaths reported. This as a 19-year-old from Pennsylvania, Kevin Beauclair, may need a double lung transplant. And doctors say it's likely due to vaping. Kevin's parents, Len and Debbie Beauclair, join us this morning. Thank you both for being here. Very sad to hear this news about your son. I'm deeply sorry for what this tragedy that you're going through and that he's going through. Len, can you tell us a little bit about how this started for your son with the vaping?
Honestly, he was a high school kid. I don't know if it was peer pressure, whatever. We found out a couple years ago. We apparently had talked him out of it for 4 to 5 months, and like high school and young college-age men will do, he went back.
Do you know how often he was vaping or what was in his vape pens or any idea about that?
From what he told us, he smoked 4 pods a week, which I think we were told a pod is equivalent to a pack of cigarettes.
Debbie, when did you start to... Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Debbie, when did you notice that things were starting to take a wrong direction here for your son?
It was 2 weeks ago. He didn't feel well during the week. He was coughing, but we thought it was his asthma because one of his persistent symptoms with asthma is coughing. And then we were treating Mucinex, hydration, all that kind of thing. That Friday, the 23rd, I took off from work to help him finish packing. He was going to leave for college that day. And when he came down, the night before he was coughing like violently, enough that he was throwing up. In the morning he came down and his color just didn't look right to me. He actually looked like grayish, and so I'm like, we got to go to the doctor. So we ran over to urgent care and they took an x-ray that showed that he had air outside of his lungs in his chest that was caused by the coughing violently, caused little holes in his lungs, so the air escaped. And then they sent us over to the hospital, and he was admitted to the intensive care unit.
And what is his condition right now?
Right now, he's under sedation. They have him, so most of the time he's not awake. They had brought him from the one hospital to the second hospital to put him on a heart-lung bypass, and then he was put in a third hospital because they felt he's a candidate for a lung transplant, double lung transplant. So he's at the third hospital now. In the past couple days, they decreased his sedation so that he's awake at times. They can check his neurological status, and he can look at us and squeeze our hand now sometimes when he's awake and shake his head yes or no.
Wow.
It's really hard though, because when he is awake, he can't, talk or anything since he's on the bypass machine.
Terrible, terrible tragedy. You know, Len, parents across the country hear these stories, and they're terrified when they listen to a story like yours. They say, that could be my kid. What do you want people to know about vaping that you've learned from your experience here?
Well, quite frankly, Jedediah, seeing what we've seen, they should be terrified. I'm not going to lie to you. No parent should walk into a hospital room and see what we saw. It's not a pretty sight. The thing that I've gathered on all this, I mean, obviously they tell us the vaping is obviously doing something to the lung tissue. You know, our son is a very healthy 19-year-old, works out all the time, and you know his lungs are in certain areas probably irreparably damaged. And the other thing I've thought about in all this is, you know, smoking wasn't great. We all kind of knew that, but it seemed to take decades for, you know, symptoms at times to appear and the results of it. My son's been vaping for 1.5 years,
Wow.
and he's already at that point. You know, it's a much different ball game, and it's a very potent ball game.
That's astounding when you say 1.5 years, because when people hear stories like this, they think that in order for something like this to happen, this would have had to have been going on for years and years and years. When you say 1.5 years, I think that sends a message to parents in itself that this can all happen very, very quickly. Your lives can change very quickly. I want to thank you both for being here. I know it's very difficult to share a story like this. We wish you the absolute best. We wish your son a speedy, quick recovery back to health. And we want to thank you for drawing attention to this issue. We know it's not easy to come on here and say this, but we really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
We appreciate you putting it out there for us too.
All the media's been great helping spread the word. We certainly appreciate that.
Thank you, and you are all, your entire family is in our thoughts and prayers. Well, how did it?
It is your shot of the morning. A mama dolphin jumping for joy when a group of fishermen rescue her baby who was caught in the net.
That's one of the many things I missed. Give me one of those. The baby dolphin getting entangled off the coast of Italy before the group set her free.
Oh, the mama dolphin seems to be showing her gratitude for helping her little one. The group said it was like something from a movie. It is. This is tear-inducing. I love, by the way, that Pete had the intro read on that. That nothing.
We don't know that she's expressing gratitude.
Look, she's very excited.
She might be exercising.
It's like Free Willy.
It's cool.
I love the Pete's even skeptical on the dolphin. It's cool.
He's like, I'm not sure the dolphin's happy.
Well, you don't know what the dolphin is thinking.
He's a very happy dolphin. Let's just go with that. It makes people happy.
Well, if you've been paying attention this summer, White Claw has been a thing. It's sort of like almost this hard seltzer instead of hard cider. So it's a seltzer that actually has alcohol. People have been drinking it. You can't even get it. It's so popular. It's running out on store shelves. White Claw says they're working around the clock to increase supply. One of two things is happening. Even genuinely, people love it and it's out of stock, or they're hyping this thing up and getting everybody
It's
riled
become
up.
like a cultish thing. Like if you go to a bar, well, I read this, but if you go to a bar and you order White Claw and they don't have any more, then the bar has been declawed. It's become this cultural phenomenon of White Claw, and they've done a good job promoting it. Well, here's some of the headlines. Apparently, this is a real big problem. White Claw shortages have millennials in a panic. America loved White Claw so much, it's running out. And White Claw is so popular, it's becoming hard to find.
So I haven't had White. Have you had White Claw?
I have. I don't.
Is it so good that it has people losing their minds?
No, you know what it is? Remember when Zima was a thing?
Oh, yes.
Like this is, and everyone was shamed for drinking Zima.
Yeah.
This is kind of like your modern Zima, is how I would put it. It's like a mixed drink in a can. It's only got 100 calories, 5% ABV. Like, it's. If you don't want to drink beer, maybe you drink this.
All I remember about Zima is I had some friends who would add other alcohol, and they called it Noxema because they would like put it on steroids. That's all I remember. Okay. So Rudy Rivas had an interesting tweet. He said, if you're having a Popeyes chicken sandwich with a White Claw this weekend, you've won the lottery. Of course, Popeyes have been running out of the chicken sandwiches.
Yeah.
Got the White Claw seltzer. You hit the lottery. You're like, you've got all the buzz going in one little meal.
That's true. And White Claw even gave a statement to Business Insider saying we are working around the clock to increase supply given the rapid growth in consumer demand. In the meantime, we have been allocating product to our distributor partners to keep all markets in stock the best we can, and we'll continue to do so until we get back to our normal safety stock position. It's amazing, though, if you look on social media, on Twitter, People are constantly tweeting about White Claw. I don't even drink alcohol, but I have some incentive to try it because I want to know what the fuss is about.
They have great PR people.
And millennials love it, and they're all on social media.
Panic over the lack of White Claw, you might have your priorities just a little out of kilter. Although I do have, I believe, a White Claw in the fridge of my bar at my house, so my house is not declawed.
Oh.
I've got some backup.
What do you think? Have you tried White Claw? Do you think this is just a whole bunch of millennial hype? Friends at FoxNews.com. And also, I want to know, do you think the Dolphins have thoughts?
Of course they do, Dolphin. Was it a happy dolphin? Do you side with me that it was absolutely a happy dolphin, or Pete with, you don't know how the animals really feel?
No, fish. No, jump.
Let us know.
Like, this is what they're thinking.
Yeah, he did on purpose.
That's true. All right, we're going to turn to some headlines for you now in the 7 a.m. hour. A sheriff blasting his state.
Can't Help Falling in Love.
Yeah, Can't Help Falling in Love. That's a classic.
I just like reminding people as we bring in Rick that, you know, one of the first dance songs that Pete had was a Justin Bieber song. And that makes the morning for me.
I was impressed with Pete.
Timberlake.
Oh,
Timberlake. My apologies.
Hey, the impressive part was his moves to
That's a good dancer.
Thank you, brother.
Seriously.
We'll get you some videotape. It's out there somewhere. Maybe we'll bring it in.
I have some on my phone.
Oh, you got to leak that stuff, Rick. Leak it.
Really?
Yeah,
the public
it was
needs
good.
it.
Hey, I
Let me
always
preview it.
Guys, I always say if you bring a sign you're going to get on TV, but you need to do a little bit better than this. Like, can you even see that?
We got in late last night. It says from Toronto to New York to see Pete eat. We watch him every weekend to eat.
There's a grilling segment coming up.
I know,
so
that's
it's
why
gonna work.
we're getting
It's gonna
excited.
Work. And what does yours say?
Mine says we love Fox News.
And the other side?
Hi, Pops.
There you go. Hi, Pops.
You gotta say hi to Dad, right?
You can't read them on that. You got to do better. You got to get at least a Sharpie or something like that.
We try.
All right, guys, let's talk about the weather out here. A chilly morning. It feels like fall across areas of the Northeast around the Great Lakes. Not the case down across the South. It is hot, in fact, down across areas of the South. Heat advisories across areas of Texas into Louisiana today. And obviously, we've talked about Dorian for about the last 12 days now. The storm bringing some rain across areas of Cape Cod and the islands, in across areas of Maine, into New Hampshire, and then that's it. It will be gone by tonight, finally. Out across the west, we have another system moving into the northern Rockies, bringing some showers, some cooler air again behind that, and we might finally tomorrow get a little monsoon activity going across the southwest that has been incredibly dry this monsoon season. All right, there's your high temperatures across the south, unfortunately, but chilly here.
Chilly.
Hi, Pops.
Hi, Pops.
Back to you inside.
Yeah, it's a little chilly out there today.
Yes, Ed and I both have Sharpies. We'll bring them
send out
outside.
the Sharpies.
They can improve their signs. Thank you,
Thanks, Rick.
And we'll be out to grill soon. All right, well, a major victory for religious freedom. A court ruling 2 filmmakers are protected by the First Amendment after refusing to work a same
Data on UFOs. According to Politico, North Carolina Congressman Mark Walker penned a letter to the Navy saying asking what they're doing to investigate sightings. While the Navy has confirmed it is looking into them, very few details have been released. And India's extraterrestrial expedition ended in confusion. Scientists losing contact with a rover they were trying to land on the moon's polar surface. India's president said he still was proud of what the team accomplished. India would have been the 4th country to accomplish a moon landing. Pete?
Lost the rover. Thank you, Ed. Well, it's being called the most important religious liberty decision since the masterpiece cake shop case. That's because for the first time, a federal appeals court has ruled that religious believers can invoke their First Amendment rights when declining to participate in same-sex weddings. The case, which is now being sent back to the lower courts, involves a Christian couple in Minnesota that runs a media production company. That couple, Carl and Angel Larson, along with their attorney from the Alliance Defending Freedom, Jeremy Tedesco, join us this morning. Carl and Angel, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your story. So you own a film company. You wanted to go into weddings, but a law in Minnesota said that you couldn't discriminate or make judgments as a company as to what weddings you film. Is that correct?
Yeah, my wife and I are storytellers, and every story we tell, we want to tell in a way that is honoring to God and serves our clients. So we love to tell marriage stories, and the law in Minnesota gave us 2 options. We could either stay silent time for making films that are consistent with our beliefs, and neither of those were good choices, so we're forced to challenge the law.
So, Angel, you've challenged the law, and ultimately it's ruled in your favor. I mean, critics will say, well, this is about discrimination. I would say you would probably look at it more as religious freedom.
Well, it's just absurd. We always look at the message, and it is never about the person. And so we, as creative story professionals, we all do this. We look at the message and never the person.
We work with everyone. Speech. We just can't promote every message.
Yeah, Jeremy, I see that you're going to chime in here. Let me, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, tweeted when the decision came out. He said, I fought alongside, this is the tweet from Keith Ellison. Do we have it? I fought alongside the LGBT community for years. As a human, I'm offended by the majority's ruling. As Attorney General, I'm going to respond in the strongest and most strategic way possible to maximize human rights and dignity for LGBTQ people, and everyone, no exceptions. So, Jeremy, you've won this iteration, but it's not over.
Yeah, well, look, the Supreme Court has said that forcing people to express messages that violate their core convictions is a violation of their dignity, and that's what's at stake in this case. Does the government have the power to threaten filmmakers with 90 days in jail to force them to create films that violate their beliefs? Or look at it another way. Does the state have the power to force an atheist marketer to create a billboard campaign promoting belief in God? The state doesn't have that power. It doesn't have that kind of power in a free society.
Carl, it's almost sometimes helpful to personalize these things to get an understanding of it. That would be like me as a commentator being told I have to take a position on something I don't believe in order to keep my job. Ultimately, you have a business, you have beliefs, you want to marry those two together.
And that's correct, and that's why this is a win for everyone. Regardless of what people believe, freedom is essential, and the government not having the power to coerce people to promote things that are against their beliefs is absolutely good for everyone.
So, Angel, have you been able to do weddings? Do you plan to do more? What's the result of this?
Well, we're still litigating the case, and the case has not come to a final conclusion. The Eighth Circuit's opinion gives a great roadmap for the ultimate victory in the case. The Minnesota may appeal it to the Supreme Court, so we'll just have to see how Minnesota decides to proceed. But this is a great victory for everybody's free speech rights. You know, the court went out of its way to say that and to say, you know, the state can't force an atheist musician to perform at an evangelical church service or a Democratic speechwriter to write speeches for a Republican candidate. And so this is a freedom we all benefit from, and it's something that should be celebrated.
Angel, last word.
We're just excited that the courts ruled in our favor, and that is freedom for everyone to be able to live and work according to what our deepest convictions.
Well, and that's ultimately what tolerance is too, right? We may not agree on everything, but we tolerate the fact that we have differences and can live together anyway. Angel and Carl, thank you very much, and Jeremy for your expertise. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And